Far beyond the crowded maps of Europe and the familiar cities of the modern world, Siberia begins like a second planet hidden inside Earth itself. It stretches across more than 13 million square kilometers, covering nearly 77% of Russia and almost one-tenth of all land on Earth. From the Ural Mountains in the west to the distant Pacific Ocean in the east, Siberia unfolds across endless forests, frozen tundra, towering mountain ranges, vast rivers, icy plains, and the desolate coastline of the Arctic Ocean. Its scale is almost impossible to truly understand. Entire nations could disappear inside Siberia many times over, yet huge regions remain nearly untouched by roads, cities, or even permanent human settlement. In many places, there are no highways cutting through the wilderness, no constant sound of traffic, and no sign that modern civilization has reached this far. Here, distance is not measured only in kilometers, but in silence, isolation, and the endless repetition of forest, snow, river, and sky. A traveler can move across Siberia for days, sometimes even weeks, and still encounter the same overwhelming landscape stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Dense taiga forests cover millions of square kilometers like a living ocean of trees. Rivers wider than some seas carve through the land with slow, unstoppable force. In winter, snow and ice erase familiar shapes from the world, turning villages, roads, and entire valleys into part of a frozen wilderness that seems to have no boundary at all. It can feel as though the world itself has forgotten where it is supposed to end. But Siberia is more than a remote region on a map. It is one of the last places on Earth where nature still feels larger than humanity. In much of the modern world, people shape the environment around them, building cities, controlling rivers, lighting the darkness, and bending landscapes to human needs. In Siberia, the balance feels reversed. Nature dominates everything. The forest, the cold, the storms, and the immense emptiness exist on a scale so vast that human presence often feels temporary and fragile by comparison. This is a land where winter can last for more than half the year, where temperatures fall so low that metal freezes to bare skin and breath turns instantly into ice. Entire rivers become solid highways of frozen water. The ground itself remains permanently frozen in many areas, locking ancient layers of earth beneath a crust of permafrost that has survived for thousands of years. Even time seems to move differently here, slower, heavier, shaped by seasons that demand patience and endurance from every living thing. To survive in Siberia has always required adaptation. Animals migrate across enormous distances, growing thick fur and powerful instincts to endure the brutal cold. Human communities scattered across the region have learned to live with isolation, relying on resilience, tradition, and an understanding of the land passed down through generations. Survival here has never been simple or guaranteed. Every settlement, every road, and every journey exists in negotiation with the environment itself. And yet, despite its harshness, Siberia possesses a strange and haunting beauty. Under the northern lights, frozen landscapes glow with shifting colors across the sky. Endless forests whisper beneath winter winds. Remote lakes reflect mountains and stars with almost unreal clarity. In the silence of Siberia, the modern world can feel unimaginably distant, replaced by something older and more elemental. To understand Siberia, we must first accept that it was never designed for comfort, speed, or easy survival. It is a continent-sized wilderness where cold, distance, and time shape everything that dares to exist. Here, humanity does not stand above nature. It stands inside it, small against a land that has remained wild, patient, and unconquered for centuries. Siberia, cold is not simply a season that arrives and fades with time. It is the defining force of the land itself, a silent power that shapes every movement, every sound, and every living creature that dares to exist within it. Here, winter is not an event. It is a presence. It settles into the earth for months at a time, transforming the landscape into a frozen world where survival depends entirely on adaptation, endurance, and respect for the ice. In places like the remote village of Oymyakon, temperatures can plunge below -60 degrees Celsius, making it one of the coldest inhabited places on Earth. At such extremes, the environment behaves differently. The air feels heavier, sharper, almost alive. Exposed skin can freeze within minutes, and every breath released into the atmosphere instantly turns into drifting crystals of ice. Eyelashes become coated in white frost, while hair stiffens under the cold before a person has even finished speaking. Simple objects become dangerous. Metal can burn skin like fire if touched without protection. Engines left outside may refuse to start after a single night in the open, forcing vehicles to remain running for hours just to survive the temperature. Even walking becomes a careful calculation of energy and exposure. Every action, opening a door, carrying water, lighting a fire, becomes part of a daily struggle against an environment that never relaxes its grip. But Siberia's cold is not sudden or dramatic like a passing storm. It is slow, patient, and relentless. It presses itself into wood, stone, rivers, soil, and bone until the entire world seems frozen in suspension. Vast rivers harden into solid highways of ice strong enough to support heavy trucks. Lakes become endless sheets of frozen glass where the wind sweeps snow across the surface like smoke drifting through the air. Forests stand silent beneath thick layers of frost, and entire landscapes seem locked in stillness beneath pale winter light. For animals, survival demands extraordinary adaptation. Many conserve energy by slowing their movements and reducing activity to the bare minimum. Thick winter fur traps precious warmth close to the body, while layers of fat protect against temperatures that would quickly kill unprepared creatures. Some species vanish into underground dens for months, waiting in darkness until the worst of winter finally loosens its hold. Others continue hunting across the frozen wilderness, following ancient instincts written by generations of survival in the coldest environment on Earth. Yet Siberia's freezing climate does more than challenge life in the present, it also preserves the past. The cold slows decay so completely that ancient remains, frozen animals, and traces of vanished worlds can remain hidden beneath the ground for thousands of years. Entire layers of history lie trapped beneath the permafrost, protected by ice like memories sealed away from time itself. But despite its beauty, Siberia is unforgiving. The cold tests every living thing with brutal honesty. Weakness, hesitation, and carelessness are punished quickly. There is little room for error in a place where nature holds absolute control. Survival belongs only to those capable of adapting to the rhythm of the land, to the silence, the isolation, and the endless presence of winter. This is Siberia, a world where temperature becomes destiny, where ice shapes the rules of existence, and where life continues only by learning to move in harmony with the cold. Far across the immense northern expanse of Siberia stretches the taiga, the largest forest biome on Earth, a colossal wilderness of larch, spruce, pine, and birch that spreads like a dark green ocean across the continent. Covering millions of square kilometers, this forest is one of the planet's greatest natural systems, storing enormous amounts of carbon deep within its soil and vegetation while quietly helping regulate Earth's climate. From the sky, the taiga appears endless, an unbroken landscape textured by rivers, frozen marshes, wetlands, burn scars left by ancient fires, and pale clearings locked beneath snow and ice. Yet stepping inside of the forest feels like entering another world entirely. The atmosphere changes almost immediately. The air grows colder, quieter, and heavier, as though the trees themselves have absorbed centuries of winter silence. Sunlight struggles to reach the forest floor through dense branches coated with frost, and every sound seems softened by the vastness surrounding it. For much of the year, snow blankets the ground, covering roots, fallen branches, and animal tracks beneath a thick white layer that turns even the smallest movement into something secretive and unseen. Life here survives with extraordinary patience. Beneath rough bark and frozen soil, insects remain dormant through the brutal cold, waiting for the brief return of warmth. Birds move carefully through the silent canopy, searching for seeds and hidden food among branches weighed down by ice. In this environment, survival depends on endurance more than speed. Summers are short, soils are poor, and temperatures can shift violently, forcing every tree to struggle for light, warmth, and space. Growth comes slowly in Siberia. Some trees spend decades reaching heights that forests elsewhere achieve in only a few years. In many regions, the ground beneath the forest is beginning to thaw unevenly as permafrost softens. Trees tilt at strange angles, creating the haunting phenomenon known as drunken forests, where entire sections of woodland appear twisted and unstable, as though the earth itself is moving beneath them. These distorted landscapes reveal how fragile the balance of the taiga truly is. But despite its stillness, the forest is never empty. Wolves move silently between the trees, following the scent of prey across snow-covered terrain. Lynx disappear into shadows almost without sound. Bears roam through remote valleys, while elk push through deep snow, searching for food hidden beneath frozen brush. Sables slip quietly through undergrowth, and owls glide overhead through the dim northern light. Every creature here is connected by an invisible network of scent, hunger, instinct, and survival. The taiga may appear motionless to outsiders, but beneath its silence lies a living system working at a scale humans rarely notice. It breathes slowly, changes slowly, and survives through rhythms shaped by cold, darkness, and time itself. In Siberia, the forest is far more than scenery stretching across the horizon. It stands as a living wall between civilization and the immense untamed interior of the continent, ancient, resilient, and endlessly wild. In the remote Russian Far East, where endless forests disappear beneath snow and towering mountains descend toward the cold Pacific coast, the Siberian tiger moves through the wilderness like a living flame against a frozen world. In a land where winter can dominate for most of the year and temperatures fall far below zero, survival depends on endurance, patience, and absolute control. Here, among the silent forests and icy rivers, the largest big cat on Earth has adapted to one of the harshest environments any predator has ever faced. The Siberian tiger, also known as the Amur tiger, is an animal built for extremes. Some males can weigh close to 300 kilograms and stretch more than 3 meters from nose to tail, making them vastly larger than most other tiger species. Its massive body is covered in thick orange fur layered with dense insulation that protects it from the brutal Siberian cold. Beneath that coat lies extraordinary muscle and strength, designed not for speed alone, but for survival in a landscape ruled by distance and scarcity. Even its paws reveal the story of adaptation, wide, soft, and powerful, spreading its weight across deep snow like natural snowshoes as it moves silently through the frozen terrain. Unlike the tropical tigers of Southeast Asia that hunt within humid jungles crowded with life, the Siberian tiger exists in a world where food is never guaranteed. The forests here are vast, but prey is scattered across enormous distances. Because of this, a single male tiger may patrol a territory larger than 1,000 square kilometers, traveling endlessly through valleys, frozen rivers, and snow-covered mountains in search of opportunity. Every movement costs energy, and every hunt becomes a careful calculation between effort and survival. Despite its enormous size, the tiger moves with astonishing silence. It slips through shadowed forests almost invisibly, leaving only faint tracks pressed into fresh snow. Deer and wild boar form the core of its diet, but hunting in Siberia is never easy. Days can pass without success. A missed attack may mean another long journey through the cold before the tiger finds another chance. Hunger is not an occasional challenge here. It is a constant companion that follows every predator across the wilderness. Yet even for such a powerful hunter, Siberia itself remains stronger. The land does not belong to the tiger. The deep snow, the freezing winds, and the endless winter force every creature to live cautiously. Storms can bury trails overnight, rivers freeze into dangerous crossings, and temperatures can drain strength from even the most resilient animals. The tiger survives not because it dominates nature, but because it has learned to negotiate with it. Often, the only evidence that a Siberian tiger has passed through an area is a line of tracks disappearing into the white silence of the forest. For a brief moment, those footprints tell the story of an unseen predator moving through the wilderness. Then the wind rises, snow begins to fall again, and the forest erases every trace as though the tiger was never there at all. The Siberian tiger represents far more than raw power. It is a symbol of adaptation, resilience, and balance within one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. In this frozen wilderness, strength alone is never enough. Survival belongs to those capable of patience, endurance, and silence. The tiger is not the unquestioned ruler of Siberia, but another survivor shaped by cold, distance, hunger, and the relentless demands of the wild. Far beyond the crowded cities and frozen roads of southern Siberia lies a place that feels almost untouched by time itself. Lake Baikal, the deepest freshwater lake on Earth and one of the most mysterious natural wonders on the planet. Hidden between mountain ranges and surrounded by vast wilderness, Baikal is more than a lake. It is an ancient world preserved in silence, ice, and unimaginable depth. Reaching 1,642 meters below the surface, Baikal descends deeper than many seas, holding nearly 20% of all the unfrozen fresh water on Earth, more than all of the North American Great Lakes combined. Its sheer size is difficult to comprehend. Standing on its frozen surface in winter, the horizon stretches so far that the lake feels less like inland water and more like a frozen ocean lost in the heart of Asia. But Baikal's greatest mystery is not only its depth, it is its age. Formed over 25 million years ago, it is considered the oldest lake on Earth, a living archive that has witnessed entire geological eras rise and disappear. While most lakes slowly fill with sediment and vanish over time, Baikal continues to survive, shaped by powerful tectonic forces deep beneath Siberia. Scientists study its waters, ice, and ancient sediments to uncover clues about Earth's climate, evolution, and the history of life itself. During winter, the lake transforms into one of the most surreal landscapes on Earth. Temperatures plunge far below freezing, sealing Baikal beneath a thick layer of crystal clear blue ice. Giant cracks spread across the surface like lightning frozen in time beneath glass. Some of these fractures can stretch for kilometers, producing deep, echoing sounds that travel across the empty wilderness. In certain places, the ice becomes so transparent that visitors can see far into the darkness below, creating the strange feeling of walking above an entirely hidden world. The clarity of Baikal's water is legendary. Visibility can extend dozens of meters beneath the surface, making the lake appear almost unreal. Sunlight penetrates through the ice into the cold depths below, illuminating rocks, trapped air bubbles, and movements from creatures living in near freezing darkness. The water feels less like ordinary water and more like a transparent window into another dimension, untouched by the modern world. Yet, Baikal is not empty. It is alive with species found nowhere else on Earth. More than 80% of the animals and organisms living here are endemic, shaped by millions of years of isolation and evolution. Deep beneath the ice, strange crustaceans crawl across the lake floor while unique fish drift silently through the darkness. Forests of freshwater sponges grow in the cold water, filtering the lake with extraordinary efficiency, while microscopic organisms continue ancient biological cycles hidden from human eyes. Among the lake's most fascinating inhabitants is the Baikal seal, one of the only freshwater seals on Earth. Living thousands of kilometers away from any ocean, these animals survive in conditions that seem impossible for marine mammals. They dive beneath the frozen surface, navigate through icy waters, and raise their young along the edges of the lake. Even today, scientists continue debating how the ancestors of these seals first reached Baikal. Some theories suggest ancient waterways connected the lake to Arctic regions long ago, but no explanation fully solves the mystery. Their presence only deepens the sense that Baikal is a world separated from everything around it. Beneath the frozen surface, life never truly stops. Even in near total darkness and temperatures close to freezing, ecosystems continue moving in silence. Tiny organisms drift through the depths while predators patrol cold underwater canyons carved over millions of years. Hidden currents move beneath the ice, carrying oxygen and nutrients through one of the most isolated freshwater systems on Earth. Lake Baikal is not simply beautiful, it is ancient, isolated, and filled with forms of life that exist nowhere else on the planet. In the heart of Siberia, surrounded by mountains and endless forests, the lake feels like a secret ocean hidden beneath ice. A forgotten world preserved by time, silence, and the cold. Far beneath the endless forests and frozen rivers of Siberia lies one of the oldest and most mysterious layers on Earth, permafrost, ground that has remained frozen for thousands, and in some regions, hundreds of thousands of years. It stretches across enormous parts of the Siberian landscape like a hidden foundation beneath the modern world, silent and motionless beneath snow, tundra, and ice. In some places, this frozen layer descends hundreds of meters deep into the earth, preserving not only soil and ancient ice, but entire fragments of vanished worlds. Locked inside this frozen ground are roots from prehistoric forests, the bones of long extinct animals, pockets of ancient gases, and organic material untouched since the Ice Age. Over time, the permafrost became a natural vault, sealing away evidence of ecosystems that disappeared long before human civilization ever emerged. Scientists exploring these frozen regions have uncovered astonishing discoveries preserved in remarkable detail. Mammoths with fur still attached to their bodies, woolly rhinoceroses, prehistoric horses, ancient plants, and even microorganisms frozen in suspended time have all emerged from the ice. Some remains appear so perfectly preserved that they seem to belong not to a distant prehistoric age, but to a world only recently lost. For researchers, Siberia's permafrost is like a frozen library buried beneath the surface of the planet, a vast archive containing clues about Earth's climate, ancient wildlife, and the dramatic environmental changes that shaped human history. But today, that frozen library is beginning to thaw. As global temperatures continue to rise, the ground that once remained permanently frozen is slowly softening. What was stable for millennia is becoming unstable within decades. Beneath the surface, enormous amounts of carbon dioxide and methane, gases trapped in frozen soil since the Ice Age, are beginning to escape into the atmosphere. Methane is especially dangerous because, over shorter periods of time, it can trap far more heat than carbon dioxide. The release of these gases creates a powerful cycle. Warming temperatures melt more permafrost, and melting permafrost releases more gases that accelerate warming even further. What happens in Siberia no longer remains isolated in the Arctic wilderness. Its effects spread across the entire planet. As underground ice melts, the land itself begins to collapse and deform. Vast depressions appear where solid ground once existed. Thermokarst lakes form across the tundra, roads crack apart, forests tilt at unnatural angles, and entire landscapes slowly sink into instability. In some places, buildings lean dangerously, pipelines shift, and villages built upon frozen ground face growing threats as the foundation beneath them changes shape. What makes this transformation so unsettling is its silence. Much of it happens gradually and invisibly beneath the surface before suddenly reshaping everything above. A landscape that appeared stable for centuries can begin changing within only a few years. This is one of Siberia's most important hidden dramas. Not a sudden disaster visible in a single moment, but a slow awakening occurring beneath the feet of millions of people. The frozen past is no longer fully asleep. Ancient ground that once preserved history is now becoming part of a global climate warning. And in many ways, Siberia has become one of the clearest signs of a warming planet, a place where the ancient Earth is beginning to thaw and where the consequences of that change may reach far beyond the Arctic itself. At the far northern edge of Siberia, the land begins to dissolve into a world of drifting ice, isolated tundra islands, frozen coastlines, and the dark, restless waters of the Arctic Ocean. It is one of the most remote and unforgiving regions on Earth, a place where the environment still dictates every movement of life. For much of the year, silence and cold dominate the landscape, shaping a world that exists on the edge of survival. During the long Arctic winter, the sun disappears entirely for weeks at a time. Darkness settles over the tundra, while powerful winds sweep across endless fields of snow and ice. Temperatures plunge far below freezing, turning rivers, coastlines, and even sections of the ocean into solid frozen terrain. In these months, the Arctic feels almost motionless, as if the entire region is locked in suspended time. But when summer finally arrives, the transformation is sudden and dramatic. Endless daylight floods the northern horizon, and the frozen ground awakens with surprising speed. Snow begins to melt, wetlands emerge across the tundra, and small plants burst into life during a growing season that lasts only a few short weeks. What appeared barren through winter becomes a landscape filled with movement, sound, and migration. Insects hatch in enormous numbers, birds return from distant continents, and the Arctic briefly becomes one of the busiest ecosystems on the planet. For thousands of years, sea ice has controlled the rhythm of this region. Each winter, it expands across the Arctic Ocean, forming massive frozen platforms that connect coastlines and hunting grounds. Then, during summer, the ice retreats once again, almost like the breathing cycle of the polar world itself. Entire ecosystems evolved around this repeating pattern, depending on the precise timing of freeze and melt. Among the animals most closely tied to the ice are polar bears. For them, sea ice is not simply part of the environment, it is the foundation of survival. Polar bears use the frozen surface as a hunting platform. Traveling across vast distances in search of seals, they wait silently beside breathing holes in the ice, relying on patience, strength, and perfect timing. But as stable sea ice disappears earlier each year, their hunting season becomes shorter and far more difficult. Bears are forced to swim longer distances, travel farther across unstable terrain, and burn enormous amounts of energy in a world where food is never guaranteed. Walruses are also being pushed into new and dangerous conditions. Traditionally, sea ice provided resting platforms between feeding trips in Arctic waters. Now, as the ice retreats farther from shore, massive groups of walruses gather along crowded coastlines instead. Thousands of animals can become packed together in a single location. In moments of panic, especially when disturbed by predators or sudden noise, the entire colony can surge at once, and young walruses are often crushed beneath the movement of the herd. Above the tundra, migratory birds arrive from every direction, some traveling thousands of kilometers from Europe, Asia, Africa, and even South America. They depend on the Arctic summer because it offers something rare: endless daylight and a sudden explosion of food. Wetlands filled with insects become temporary nesting grounds for millions of birds, yet this opportunity is incredibly short. Within weeks, the cold begins returning and the migrations start again. Beneath the icy Arctic waters, another hidden system is constantly at work. Tiny plankton blooms appear when sunlight returns and sea ice melts. Though microscopic, these organisms form the foundation of the Arctic marine food web. Fish feed on the plankton, seals feed on the fish, whales follow the seals, and entire chains of life depend on the seasonal cycle happening at exactly the right moment. Even small disruptions to the timing of ice melt can ripple through the ecosystem with enormous consequences. Today, the Arctic is warming faster than much of the rest of the planet. Temperatures are rising, sea ice is shrinking, and weather patterns are becoming increasingly unstable. What happens here does not remain isolated in the far north. Changes in Arctic ice influence ocean currents, atmospheric systems, and climate patterns far beyond Siberia itself. The Arctic edge of Siberia is not an empty white wilderness at the top of the map. It is a living frontier where ice, ocean, atmosphere, and wildlife remain deeply connected in a fragile balance shaped over thousands of years. Every frozen coastline, every migration, and every movement of the sea is part of a larger system working together. And as the ice continues to change, the entire Arctic world changes with it. Siberia is crossed by some of the greatest river systems on Earth, immense waterways that stretch across an almost unimaginable landscape of forests, frozen plains, mountains, and tundra. Among them are the Ob, the Yenisei, and the Lena, rivers so vast that they flow for thousands of kilometers before finally reaching the Arctic Ocean. Seen from above, they appear like enormous veins running through the body of an entire continent, carrying life into regions that would otherwise seem empty and motionless. These rivers are far more than simple channels of water. They are moving systems that transport sediment, nutrients, fish, meltwater, and even the memory of ancient climates across one of the harshest environments on Earth. Every season transforms them. Every current reshapes the land around them. In a wilderness where distances are overwhelming and roads are rare, the rivers become the true arteries of Siberia. The Lena River alone stretches for more than 4,000 kilometers, carving its way through dense taiga forests, deep permafrost, towering cliffs, and endless tundra before reaching the frozen Arctic coast. Along its journey, the landscape changes constantly. In some regions, the river moves quietly between forests of larch and pine. In others, it cuts through dramatic rock formations and wide floodplains that disappear beneath snow and ice for much of the year. During winter, Siberia enters a state of near total stillness. Temperatures plunge far below freezing, and the rivers harden into vast frozen highways. What was once flowing water becomes solid ground strong enough for people, animals, and heavy vehicles to cross. Entire communities rely on these temporary ice roads because many remote settlements become almost unreachable by ordinary land routes. In these months, the rivers connect isolated parts of Siberia in ways impossible during the warmer seasons. But when spring arrives, the calm disappears with astonishing force. The ice begins to fracture and collapse under the pressure of rising water. Massive slabs grind against each other, producing violent floods and powerful surges that can tear apart riverbanks and reshape entire sections of land. The breakup of the ice is not gradual or gentle. It is explosive, chaotic, and incredibly dangerous. For many regions, this annual thaw is both a source of renewal and a season of destruction. As the brief warm season spreads across Siberia, the rivers breathe life into enormous wetlands and floodplains. These areas become critical breeding grounds for birds, insects, fish, and mammals that depend on the short northern summer. Migratory birds arrive in huge numbers, filling the skies above the marshes. Fish move through the river systems to spawn, while insects emerge in immense swarms that support entire food chains. For a few precious months, the frozen silence of winter is replaced by movement, sound, and biological abundance. The influence of these rivers extends far beyond the interior of Siberia. They carry immense volumes of fresh water northward into the Arctic Ocean, affecting sea ice formation, ocean salinity, and coastal ecosystems. In this way, the rivers connect distant inland forest and tundra directly to the fragile Arctic environment. What happens deep within Siberia eventually reaches the polar seas. For generations, indigenous communities and remote villages along these waterways have adapted their lives to the rhythm of the rivers. Fishing seasons, migration routes, transportation, and survival itself have always depended on understanding the changing flow of water and ice. Wildlife follows these same patterns. Reindeer, birds, fish, and predators all move according to the seasonal pulse of the rivers. In Siberia, a river is never just a river. Depending on the season, it can become a road, a barrier, a food source, a migration path, or a deadly force of nature. It shapes movement, survival, and the balance of life across an enormous wilderness. And when viewed from high above the earth, these rivers seem almost alive. Endless currents winding through the frozen silence of the continent. They are the moving pulse of Siberia, flowing through a land that otherwise appears locked in stillness and ice. For thousands of years, humans have lived across the immense wilderness of Siberia, not by defeating the land, but by learning how to exist within its unforgiving rhythms. In a region where winter can dominate most of the year and distances stretch farther than entire countries, survival has always depended on understanding nature rather than resisting it. Here, the environment is not simply a backdrop to human life. It is the force that shapes every decision, every movement, and every tradition. Indigenous peoples such as the Evenki, Nenets, Yakuts, Chukchi, and many others developed entire cultures around the realities of cold, migration, rivers, forests, and endless snow-covered plains. Their knowledge was not written in books, but carried through generations, passed down through observation, memory, and experience. They learned how to read the sky before storms arrive, how to navigate frozen rivers, and how to survive in places where a single mistake could become fatal. Life in Siberia demanded patience, resilience, and a deep respect for the land itself. For reindeer herders, survival has always depended on movement. Reindeer are far more than livestock. They provide transport across frozen terrain, clothing for protection against deadly cold, food during the harshest winters, and a sense of cultural identity that connects entire communities to their ancestors. Herders follow ancient migration routes across tundra and forest, carefully adjusting to snowfall, ice conditions, grazing patterns, and seasonal changes. Even a small shift in weather can have enormous consequences. If rivers freeze too late, if snow becomes too deep, or if thawing arrives unexpectedly early, entire migration paths can collapse, threatening the survival of both animals and people. In Siberia, nature controls the timetable of life. The thickness of ice determines whether communities can travel safely. The timing of snowfall decides where herds can feed. Rivers become highways in winter and barriers in spring. Every season transforms the landscape into something entirely different, forcing people to adapt again and again. Survival here has never been about controlling the environment. It has always been about responding to it. Even in modern cities, the power of the environment remains impossible to ignore. In Yakutsk, one of the coldest major cities on Earth, daily life unfolds under temperatures that can plunge below minus 40 degrees Celsius. Yet, despite the brutal cold, the city continues to function. Markets open, buses move through frozen streets, children attend school, and workers continue their routines beneath clouds of frozen breath. Buildings stand on deep concrete piles because the permafrost beneath them must remain permanently frozen. If the ground begins to thaw, entire structures can shift, crack, or collapse. In Siberia, even architecture must negotiate with the earth itself. Clothing here is designed not for fashion, but for survival. Layers of fur, insulated fabric, and protective coverings shield skin from frostbite and lungs from painfully cold air that can burn with every breath. Daily tasks that seem ordinary elsewhere, driving a car, walking outside, or waiting for transport, become acts that require preparation and caution. The cold is not an inconvenience, it is a constant presence woven into every part of life. At the same time, modern Siberia has become a land of massive industrial expansion. Railways cut across frozen wilderness, while mines, oil fields, gas pipelines, and industrial towns rise in places where nature resists permanence. These projects bring economic power, but they also create a striking contrast between ancient traditions and modern extraction. On one side are communities that learn to move with the land and adapt to its cycles. On the other are systems attempting to reshape the land into something permanent, profitable, and controllable. This tension defines much of Siberia today. The region reveals two very different ways of understanding survival, one based on cooperation with nature, and another built on the belief that nature can be dominated. Yet Siberia constantly reminds humanity that the environment always has the final word. Cold, distance, isolation, and unstable ground decide what roads can exist, where cities can grow, and how people are forced to live. The people of Siberia understand something the outside world often forgets. Survival is not about conquering the planet. It is about learning how to negotiate with it. In one of the harshest environments on Earth, human life continues not through dominance, but through adaptation, respect, and the willingness to move with forces far greater than ourselves. Siberia has long been imagined as a world of endless snow, frozen rivers, and silent forests buried beneath ice. For generations, it symbolized cold in its purest form, a distant land where winter ruled almost every aspect of life. But in recent years, another force has begun reshaping this vast wilderness. Not ice, not snow, fire. Across the immense Siberian landscape, wildfires have grown larger, hotter, and more destructive than many communities and ecosystems were ever prepared to face. Millions of hectares of forest have burned in seasons that now stretch longer than before, covering enormous regions in smoke, visible even from space. Entire skies have turned orange and gray as thick clouds drift thousands of kilometers beyond the fire zones, carrying the effects of Siberia far across continents and oceans. Some of these fires move quickly across dry grass and surface vegetation, consuming trees, shrubs, and everything exposed to the open air. Others behave in a far more dangerous way. Beneath the forest floor lies deep peat and organic soil built from centuries of slowly accumulated plant material. When flames penetrate these underground layers, they ignite carbon that has remained trapped beneath the frozen earth for generations. What burns is no longer only the forest of today, but part of the planet's ancient stored history. In the most extreme conditions, certain fires refuse to fully disappear even after winter arrives. Known as zombie fires, they continue smoldering underground beneath snow and frozen ground, hidden from sight for months at a time. Then, when warmer temperatures return, the fires can emerge again, reigniting dry vegetation as if the land itself never stopped burning. It creates a disturbing contradiction: a frozen world where fire survives beneath the ice, waiting silently for another season to begin. Yet fire itself is not completely unnatural in Siberia. Boreal forests have evolved with cycles of burning for thousands of years. Periodic fires clear old growth, recycle nutrients into the soil, and create space for new vegetation to emerge. In moderation, fire can renew the forest and maintain balance within the ecosystem. But the balance begins to collapse when fires become too frequent, too intense, or too widespread.